السلام عليكم Shaykh Javed.
I'm Sheikh, how are you?
Ahlan, alhamdulillah, I'm good. Just give me a moment, inshallah. We'll start in a moment and just close the door before I get disturbed by the kids. La ilaha illallah. Oh, Adil, Mufti Adil's already bombarding us with questions. Bismillah. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Wa ba'd. MashaAllah. طيب.
Here's a question that's probably relevant for you now.
No, hold on a second. Before hold on. I just want to make it clear. I know you said something about let's not get into a discussion about the nightmare of Sunday, but can we make it clear? We just finished the tafsir class, and even though we're talking about Surah Yasin and talking about Quran, somehow it came up in there. So can we make it absolutely clear that nobody's allowed to speak about as though Sunday never happened or Sunday evening never happened? Sunday afternoon happened. Sunday evening never happened. And anybody making any comments on that will be removed quickly from this gathering. Especially Mitchell. Mitchell, for some reason, wants to go on about Arsenal. Naam, tfaddal.
Fine, Dave. So someone's asking about cats being pure, but the litter tray that they use contains impurities in which they sort of scrape their feet to cover them up. So does that mean the whole house is impure?
Hold on. Again, you always see questions that I don't see.
Yeah, it's a bit further down. It's not right at the top.
Far down.
There's been a few cat questions actually last few weeks.
Are you looking online on Facebook?
No, I'm looking on Zoom.
Well, what's the answer? Can you share the answer, please? While
we can't assume. We don't make assumptions about impurities. If we're sure that there is impurity on the floor, then we take it. But in terms of making a deduction that they're in the litter tray, therefore they've transferred it to the rest of the house, that doubt doesn't remove certainty. And generally speaking, from what we've read in classes, like surfaces like laminate flooring and wipeable surfaces, you can see whether they're clean or not. If they look clean, they are clean. If they're not clean, they're easy to just wipe them clean. But I mean, we don't have a litter tray for our cat. Our cat goes outside, so she does her business there. But occasionally we have litter trays when they have to keep them inside. I've not noticed any impurities elsewhere in the house. Have you got your cats?
Yeah, we've got a couple of kittens. We bought it a couple of weeks ago, and because I'm not even sure how old they are, but they're very, very young kittens.
Yeah. So
they're being house trained at the moment, so they're not really going out.
Yeah.
Because at the very beginning, so there is a litter there. But even with that, spot on. Like, you don't assume impurity. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam indicated that the saliva of a cat is impure. So you assume it's pure unless you know otherwise. So I still can't see where that question is, but I think that pretty much answers the question. Yeah. Which sorry, Dr. Javed, it confirms my point that I don't really need to be on here. This is just for you.
No, you do.
No, yeah. I've got enough going on.
Yeah.
Instead of talking about
people log on to hear you from the من كل فج عميق. Yeah.
Say Assalamu alaikum to Uncle Javed.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Musa.
Are you Sheikh? Are you Sheikh? And there's little Sheikh Fatima. I need to get them to disappear somehow.
No.
Hold on a second. Hold on. I'm gonna put my video on or off. Just give me a moment and I'll be back.
We've had a few questions over the last few weeks, and there's obviously been some follow-up questions as well. So just for the listeners, it's not always possible to deal with the follow-up questions, although we'd love to deal with the follow-up questions to try and, get through a range of different masail, and we have to kind of sometimes sacrifice these follow-up questions for a new question. I'll just talk about follow-up questions. Sometimes we can't always deal with follow-up questions because they just keep coming. Okay, so
do you know connected, because we just discussed the point about cats. Yeah, and so generally assume purity. Just an additional point as well as something that's been asked. It's commonly held that you're not allowed to buy cats or kittens, and there is some hadith that mention that allude towards that. But the general view, particularly in the Hanafi madhab, is that there's no issue whatsoever in buying cats. The only thing that you can't is the animal that's inherently impure, which is pigs. So yeah, so with cats and kittens, there's no issue whatsoever with buying them. But then that point at the bottom there, if we've accidentally purchased cat food that has pork in it, what is the hukm of that transaction? We have fed the cats this food. Also, is all cat food valid to purchase? That's an important question there. Just on that point, Dr. Saab, what do you feed your cats?
Range of stuff, but we found she only really eats. It's called, I think, Sheba, and you get fish and meat versions of it.
So you only buy the halal stuff for it?
When we had the cat, I asked Shaykh Abdul Rahim, and he says it's all good. I've heard different things. I've heard people say no, it must be halal, but
the issue
it's not the feeding, it's the purchase. It's the purchase. But he said, from what I remember, he said it does have a value because, a bit like when you buy manure.
ثاقب. Can you silence your side before everybody hears your personal conversation, Thaqib? We need some entertainment occasionally.
So anyway, he seemed to suggest that it's a bit like buying manure, for a purpose. But I have heard that it's different.
It's different.
But you can buy fish. I mean, she loves fish.
Generally, the view of the teachers that I've discussed that with is that no, it's not valid to buy. Because you're absolutely right. The issue is about purchasing, buying cat food. Like, for example, if there's a dead rat out there or a dead mouse, then you went and picked it up and fed it to your cat. There's no issue with that. It's not like it's not the issue about you've got to feed your cat halal food. It's how do you actually get hold of that food? So yeah, so where's that question gone? I just lost that question.
I've lost
so the hukm of the transaction, if you accidentally purchased it, and anybody who's done something accidentally is forgiven for that, but it just means that wasn't a valid transaction. The cat itself is not the problem. We fed the cat this food. The cat itself is not the problem. Like, if a cat had impurity on it, washes its mouth, then there's no issue with that. Wallahu a'lam.
Okay, it's similar question related to food, but not for cats, for people. Doritos and Walkers, they say we use soy sauce in one of our flavorings for chili heatwave Doritos. So as a fermented product, it contains trace levels of alcohol, trace amounts of ethanol, is also used in some products as a flavor enhancer. I'm not sure about flavor enhancer.
Well, then, according to this is a direct response from them. So how would you know when this is an official response?
Because there's no flavor with ethanol. It's nasty, right? But what they do use ethanol for is to bring flavors into stuff. Okay, that's just chemistry, like as a solvent.
I think that's perhaps what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's not in quotation marks. I think that's maybe from the questionnaire. Based on the above, is it permissible to eat crisps which contain the above?
Tell you, ethanol is alcohol. Ethanol is alcohol. So, leaving aside that, anything that has alcohol within it, it doesn't matter. if alcohol is introduced into something, doesn't matter what the percentage is, what the amount is, it makes that najis, it makes it impure. If something ferments of itself, as long as it doesn't get to the point that it intoxicates, then it's allowed. So here, because it's been added in, so then it is a problem. Then it should be avoided. Allah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's asking about Surah Abasa. What's the story behind the revelation of Surah Abasa?
طيب, Surah Abasa. Now, usually when it comes to Surah Abasa, hold on a second. Asif, but we're going to throw you out, mate. With the Hanafis, it's 6-1 worse than 7-2. Can I just say something about the Asif? 7-2 is a blip. It's not going to happen again. 6-1 is going to be a regular thing for you, for you lot. Your team, your squad, your manager is awful.
Solskjaer has got 9 lives, man. That evening was supposed to be dedicated to him.
I know.
Anyway, we're not talking about it.
We're
It's
not.
forbidden.
No, just get rid of that. Get rid of Mr. Asif from there. Surah Abasa. Usually when that question is raised, it's more about Abdullah ibn Maktoum, the blind Sahabi, Abasa wa tawalla an ja'ahu al-a'ma wa ma yudrika la'allahu yazakka. So the background that's usually mentioned about that is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was doing da'wah to ru'asa al-mushrikeen, so some of the leaders of the unbelievers. And Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Maktoum radiallahu anhu came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanting to learn. And the Prophet frowned and turned away. Abasa wa tawalla. He frowned and he turned away. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He revealed a surah to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, advising the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that it would have been better if he'd spoken to Abdullah ibn Maktoum other than the arrogant leaders of Quraysh. And this is min bab tark al-afdal lil-fadila, for the Prophets and the Prophets as a whole. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to them in that manner, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just raising their rank, because what the Prophet did there was not wrong. He knew that he could have spoken to the Sahabi later, but instead he spoke to hoping that the leaders would have accepted, and then the da'wah would have spread so much more. So it wasn't that the Prophet did something wrong, but Allah was always raising the Prophet وَعَلَّمَكَ مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ تَعْلَمُ, and He taught you what you did not know. So min bab tark al-afdal lil-fadila. So that's an example of leaving something that's higher for something that's still acceptable and good. Wallahu a'lam. So
is that one of the surahs that the munafiqeen would sometimes recite deliberately? I know there was a few. I seem to remember something. I can't remember the details though. But they would recite that because they took it as, as something that would be hurtful to the Prophet or something. Maybe I just imagined it.
I've just seen something there. طيب inshallah. Yeah, no, wallahu, I haven't heard that. I haven't come across that. So perhaps there's something to that. I don't know.
Okay. Ready for a difficult one? Okay. So this is about doubts in Islam, and the question is, thinks that they were a believer last week, but right now they don't believe in them, and they're concerned, and they're wanting to know what they should do.
Ya Rab. I have some doubts about Islam and Allah and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We may have believed in them, but right now, no. In the tafsir class, I don't know if it's the same point, because again, it was worded differently, but I don't know if it's the same thing, but it's a similar point. There's waswasa, which is khawatir, right? When you say you have doubts, like how real were those doubts? How real were those doubts? So is it just something just popped into your mind, just came into your mind? Something that came and goes, comes and goes, then say, A'udhu Billah. Don't hold on to it, just let go of it. But if it's something that was real, like a person just sat down and thought about it and genuinely had doubts in Allah and the Messenger and Islam, then make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that would, so make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, repeat the shahada to yourself, say la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, inshallah Allah ta'ala accepts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts. But then if it was some real doubt that you had, that alhamdulillah is gone, you should also look at that, like why are such doubts coming into your mind? And even if it's a fleeting thought, like fleeting thoughts come from somewhere. So if you're having doubt in your actual faith itself, it's like what's happening in your faith, whether it's a fleeting thought or a real doubt, what's happening that such doubts can arise. Expose yourself more to the Quran, expose yourself more to the words of the Messenger, expose yourself to people and gatherings and classes of goodness, and inshallah ta'ala through that even real doubts will go. Allahu A'lam. But when somebody's distant from Allah and His Messenger and has no real iman or no real practice of iman within his life, then a person is a lot more prone to being affected by doubts. Allahu A'lam. Allah. Okay. Let's look at something else.
Right.
Yeah, it looks like somebody else hacked in.
Yeah.
7-2 again coming up.
Okay, so we had another food-related thing, but it's something we discussed recently about gelatin. So the question is asking, what of bovine gelatin? As some say, the chemical composition changes to the point that it no longer resembles bovine, and similarly with pork gelatin.
Allah, istihala, it's the concept of istihala, like undergoing change. Chemical changes to its nature. The truth is, wallah, from what I understand, it doesn't. It doesn't. Like gelatin is still gelatin. It still has the composition of the animal product within it.
Yeah.
Pork gelatin is still pork gelatin. It may alter, but it's not. It hasn't. It's not like grapes becoming alcohol, becoming vinegar, where there's a real change. So like gelatin is still the animal product. So even though you are right, there are some who have claimed that it does undergo a real change. Allah, that doesn't seem to be a valid claim. So if it has pork gelatin within it, it has beef gelatin within it, bovine gelatin, it remains haram to consume. Allahu A'lam.
Okay. Is shirk forgiven?
Afan, sorry, just before that, Rawdah Trust and Thaqib and so, is there any way of removing that comment? I don't know if you can.
Or even closing the chat. Maybe.
Yeah, perhaps that's the better option, just closing the chat. If you can close the chat down and then anybody wants to put a Q&A through, they can do. Yeah. And if anything like that comes through, then that can be blocked and removed. Allahu A'lam. Sorry, what was that?
Where was I? Yeah, shirk, can it be forgiven?
Well, first of all, on that, like people need to be clear what they mean about shirk. Because shirk has types to it. Like the shirk which is al-asghar, a shirk al-khafi, which is like the lesser type of shirk, which is the hidden type of shirk, which is trying to impress people, trying to do things just to gain attention, insincerity within acts. That's all referred to as shirk. Because that's فَمَنْ يُؤْمِنْ فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. He should not commit shirk in his worship of his Lord with anybody. So there the shirk is that even though you're worshipping Allah at the same time you want to impress others, you've now shared your worship with other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that shirk doesn't take a person out of the fold of Islam, and that's definitely shirk that can be forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if it's a shirk of like a Hindu, for example, or the Meccan idolaters or paganism is spreading. Paganism is spreading here in the Western world. If it's that level of shirk, can it be forgiven? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refused to forgive it. It's not a question of can it. إنه من يشرك بالله فقد حرم الله عليه الجنة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, truly those who commit shirk along with Allah, Allah's made haram for them Jannah. So it's not a question can it, because that's a hypothetical theological question. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said is that He's not going to forgive it. Wallahu a'lam.
For some reason, a lot of people want to know what your favorite qasida is.
What's yours? Well, whatever answer you give, you're gonna have to sing it.
In that case, I don't have one.
Yeah.
My first one was "We Are the Young Muslims" because it was so bad. It was amazing. It was amazingly bad. Right?
Do you know what? Do you know what? Even though that was a funny joke, but I don't think any of those online understood your joke, because you need in your late 40s to understand that.
Yeah, that's true. It's true.
Well, you know what? For everybody else listening, Masha, that was a really funny, witty joke by Dr. Javed. Shame nobody understood it.
But anyway, what are your favorite ones?
In answer to that, like the way I look at what's my favorite is that what touches you the most, that perhaps even brings you into tears. That's just not favorite in terms of like most beautiful voice, and even it's like what touches you the most. So go on, when you're sat alone, nobody there but you, just sitting there watching a bit of YouTube. What's the qasida, if you want to get really touched in your soul and spirit? What's the one that you start playing?
قد كفاني إن في الجنة.
Sung by who? Because I think one of the keys with qasaid is the singer of the munshid. Because often, qasida comes from the soul.
Yeah.
We talk about praise of the Prophet or any type of qasida, it comes from the soul of the one who's reciting it.
إن في الجنة, there's some Moroccans who sang that. I heard it first in the 90s, and it was just amazing. And even to this day, I've heard Shami singers sing it. It's just not the same. These Moroccans, they really know how to sing a tune. In fact, most Moroccans, when they sing qasidas, it's just amazing. It's another level.
So you love the Moroccan reciters more?
I think they've got something on the Shami singers. I don't like it when they become an orchestra, I'll be honest. That really cheeses me off, right? When they've got cymbals and triangles and whatever it is that they play. And I don't like performances, but when it's just a dhikr gathering and Shami singers are amazing, but there's just something extra in the Maghribi singers that I don't know what it is, but it's just something.
Do you know what? I'm trying to think of what touches me more than anything else. Because in terms of qasidas, you got the Burda, for example, you got the things that you mentioned. But I was just thinking there, I don't even know who the singer is. He's from, I think, Dagestan or one of those stands. One of those stands countries. So Central Asia.
You should be a political commentator.
He sings "As-subhu bada min tal'atihi, wal-laylu daja min wafratihi." Absolutely, which is incorrectly ascribed to Abu Hanifa, describing it's an absolute. And although I'll actually share the link. On here. It touches me more than anything else as a qasida. The way that this person sings it. Allahu alam. As-subhu bada min tal'atihi wal-laylu daja min wafratihi. I'll share the link there. Although I'm going to share it. It's on YouTube, but for some weird reason, the video, the pictures in the video about like some dolphin swimming in some swimming pool, and this guy swimming. Don't know what that's got to do with it, but as a song, it's absolutely amazing. It really touches me more than anything else. Let me find it.
SubhanAllah.
Marhaba.
Yeah, I love Qad Kafani. I love that. It's never gets old. I find that amazing as well. That with qasidas, they don't age. They don't age like other. I don't know. I don't listen to Western songs, but I assume that they age a little bit. So some of them, people get bored of them.
Mm-hmm.
But these are amazing.
Yeah. Oh, it's not that one. I'm sorry, I'm looking for it, but it's a different. I found the Maher Zain version of it. It's not the one that I was looking for.
Not keen on the studio versions either. You know, like people wear stuff like this and speaking to my this.
Hold on, how do I share something in the Q&A? So I'll send it to you and you can share it.
Yeah. Okay. Ruling on tawassul and istighatha.
That's
What's
your subject, isn't it?
What is the distinction between them, and why do Salafis claim that it's shirk? What do your teachers say regarding it, especially istighatha? Do they practice it? If so, in what way?
Tawassul is within Ahl Sunnah is generally accepted as being, is generally agreed as being acceptable. And the idea of tawassul is where you make a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because or through a particular individual. Like you ask Allah subhanahu because of your love for the Prophet and forgive me, because of this wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me, and so on. So tawassul, the Salafis, just leave that question on there before you go on. The leave aside what the Salafis claim. Why do they claim it's shirk? They believe that they describe them partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he says Iyyaka nasta'een, that we only ask of you. So they believe that you're asking somebody other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's more with istighatha than tawassul, because tawassul you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of someone or because of something. Whereas with istighatha you're seeking help from that person. And that's where there's a bigger claim of shirk from them. So, Ya ibadallahi a'inuni. The Prophet's nice and told, if you're lost on a journey, call out to the angel and say, oh slaves of Allah, help me. That's istighatha. The key within Ahl Sunnah is that we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates within anyone or anything that he wills the power to assist. There's nothing inherent within anybody to assist. Generally our teachers generally, they accepted that practice as a practice. Allahu
A'lam. Hand gel containing alcohol. What do you think? Is it permissible, haram to use, bad to use?
No, hand gel's okay. It's manufactured alcohol. It's not actual alcohol that's drunk. So it's okay. There's no problem with
that. Michio's got a question.
Is Michio, what's Michio going on about? Is he anything controversial about Arsenal or?
No, he's kept off football, mashallah. He's got a dub. He's asking about how do you deal with people.
No, I've seen something. He's talking about Everton as well.
Where?
That comes later.
All right, okay. So he's asking about people who he knows who have beliefs that bring them either into deviance or out of Islam. And so he wants to know what's the best way to address those issues. And it's difficult. I suppose we all increasingly know people who have strange beliefs, including like not believing in praying 5 times a day, or not believing in hadith is really widespread. That's horrible.
It is
horrendously widespread.
It is.
Claiming that Sayyidina Ibrahim al-Islam was in shirk before he believed in Allah, na'udhu billah, and so on and so forth. So,
just on that point, before dealing with that, like particularly that thing there that Mitch was mentioned about believing that Sayyidina Ibrahim was in shirk. When you hear something like that, You really appreciate the system of scholarship that exists within Ahl Sunnah. If you went to the Quran directly, if you went to the Quran directly, you could falsely assume that. And when he's speaking to people that the Son is my Lord, my God, and my Lord, and so on. And that's why there's such a brilliant systematic way of approaching all of these. It's not random, it's not haphazard. So when you see like people going away reading the Quran and coming away with the idea that Ibrahim was a mushrik, like I've even heard somebody was saying that Ibrahim was a liar because the hadith in Bukhari that he lied 3 times. If you don't have a systematic way of approaching these things, then the greatest of all humanity, Ibrahim is the second after the Prophet. You're going to start accusing him of being a mushrik. You're going to start accusing him of being a liar. So, alhamdulillah, for the way of Ahl Sunnah that provides us a way to understand all of these things without being misguided when coming to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. In terms of dealing with such people, and it's about bringing them into the realms of scholarship. But there's so much arrogance with that. There's so much arrogance that goes with that. Like those who refuse to accept the Sunnah, how are they going to accept the words of the Prophet? How are they going to accept the words of ulama if they even refuse to accept the Sunnah? Like you say, we don't accept hadith, then you're telling them that you need to come into line with the understanding of the people of knowledge, but they can't even accept the words of the Prophet. So in the end, like Mitchell, with somebody like that, it's looking at the underlying problems within their ideas and trying to engage them at that level, like speak to them where they're at. So like somebody who's denying Sunnah, Hadith, then you need to start discussing with about the centrality of the Hadith as we understand it from the Quran itself. Somebody who doesn't believe in the obligation of 5 prayers a day, you need to come to at that point, using the Quran as a way to point towards the understanding of 5. Somebody saying things like that about Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, showing him through the Quran the fallacy of his understandings. It's difficult. It's difficult to do because it requires a level of scholarship to be able to treat that. But where a person has become misguided through his own arrogance and ignorance, that's where it has to come from.
But also, to the person you're talking to, they need to have the capacity to follow logical arguments and logical points, and that's what is seriously missing. They just don't see what's right in front of them, and it's very sad, really.
Just follow on there, because somebody has sent a follow-on point to that. So what is the explanation of the ayahs regarding Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam that were mentioned in the previous question? Just the first point on that, there's an ijma' of Ahl Sunnah. There's a consensus of Ahl Sunnah that it's impossible for a prophet to fall into kufr before and after. There's a verse in Surah Ash-Shu'ara, Kuntu min al-kafirin, where Musa alayhi salam says something like that I was from the unbelievers. Unbelievers there is not unbelieving in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No prophet can ever be affected by kufr, not before nor after they were declared as prophets. So particularly there about Ibrahim alayhi salam, comes in Surah Al-An'am. When Ibrahim alayhi salam he's pointing to this people, they worship planet Venus, and they worship the moon, and they worship the sun. So Ibrahim alayhi salam is showing them the temporal nature of these afilin, something that changes and sets and rises. That's not divine in nature, because it's changing. It has a beginning, it has an end. That's standard aqeedah. So what does Allah say shortly after that? وَتِلْكَ حُجَّتُنَا آتَيْنَاهَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ عَلَى قَوْمِهِ. That these were the proofs that we gave to Ibrahim against his people. He did not hold that as a belief. It's almost like a hypothetical. You go to a Christian and say, Allah says this, قُلْ إِن كَانَ لِلرَّحْمَنِ وَلَدٌ فَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْعَابِدِينَ. Say to them that if God Almighty has taken a son, then I'll be the first to worship. So it's not that Ibrahim ﷺ held those as beliefs. Ibrahim ﷺ was using them as an argument, a rational argument to disprove their belief. Wallahu alam. Then also with that, many Christians are in shirk before they came to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Islam. So Ibrahim alayhi salam was searching. He wasn't searching. Allah said, why would you say Ibrahim alayhi salam was searching? Allah doesn't Allah doesn't say that. What did Allah say? وَتِلْكَ حُجَّتُنَا آتَيْنَاهَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ عَلَى قَوْمٍ. These are the proofs that we gave Ibrahim alayhi salam against his people. Ibrahim alayhi salam wasn't searching. Ibrahim alayhi salam was being shown by Allah. This is how you debate against your people. So I don't know what that point is about. Similar to Christians were searching before. It's got nothing to do with that. Allah gave him the hujjah. He gave him a proof against his people. Allahu Akbar.
Oh, so we've got one question about: is there any book that has everything about Islam in it, every section about Islam?
What are we looking at? Ihya Ulumuddin. Ihya Ulumuddin. What are we looking at?
5 past 9.
It's way after that now. Do you know what, honestly, I don't see what you see half the time. Allah. Is there any book that has everything about Islam in it, every section about Islam? Ihya Ulumuddin, the one book that said if every book disappeared, it'd be enough. Ihya Ulumuddin. But at the same time, having said Ihya Ulumuddin, don't just go and open it, because there are parts in there that a person must understand that, and it wasn't written for the laity. It wasn't written for, if you're speaking about, I want to learn something about Islam, go and find the teachers of knowledge. Don't just sit around reading books. Go and find the teachers of knowledge. Allah when He taught us to pray to Him, guide us, Sirat alladhina an'amta alayhim, the path of those that you blessed. It's the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala you need to go and seek that knowledge from. And then once you have some grounding in the knowledge that's given by the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you're able to grasp what's within the books of knowledge.
I was relative of one questioner converted to Shiism 5 years ago, and they've been in touch and want to build a house for themselves and ask for a loan. So they can afford to give the loan, but should they decline the request simply because they become a Shia?
Did you say it was, again, let me just go and scan through. Did you say it was a family member?
Yeah, close relative.
And they become Shia?
Yeah.
Why is that happening so much? Perhaps not so much, but I know of cases. Sunnis becoming Shia. You know what it's down to? We shout all day long about being Sunni. We don't know jack about it.
Yeah.
And the Shia, they're well trained in debating with Sunnis. Even the most ignorant Shia, they're trained in the issues of the Sunnis. Yeah. Sunnis will just argue all day long amongst themselves, and then when Shia comes with some arguments they haven't got a clue, they can get turned easily. It's a problem, a real problem. The fitna of Tashayyu' in this time, the fitna of people swerving towards Shi'ism in this time without being grounded in Sunni beliefs. La ilaha illallah.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, no, so in answer to that, yeah, I mean, it's a contract there, it's a financial contract. So on the basis, like if you had a family member who's not a Muslim, or a neighbor who's not a Muslim, like, it doesn't stop you from lending him money. And so even though that person's become a deviant in the family member, if you had a non-Muslim family member, it doesn't mean you can't have any interaction with him, particularly when it's about financial matters. Allahu Akbar. So there's no harm in lending that person that money. Allahu Akbar.
I've got to ask this.
Are you laughing at? Are you laughing at?
No, I shouldn't laugh, to be honest. It's a serious question, but it's just the way it played out in my head. Are spouses meant to love each other unconditionally for the sake of Allah, like we love our children? If so, how can we love our spouses unconditionally, even though sometimes, due to maybe our nafus, tiredness and frustration, we can't stand them, although we love them, in brackets? Yeah.
Oh, you sure that's not from your spouse or mine?
I'm not even I didn't ask.
You know what? I'm not going to answer that because it could be a trap.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. You answer that, please. You're married longer than me, so go on.
look, you've got to try and love everyone. And
Stop
if you
playing
can't think, if you can't think of anything else other than the fact that Allah somehow loved them enough to put iman in their hearts, and that is a massive blessing from Allah subhanahu wa
no,
ta'ala.
cop out that answer, because
But
that
okay,
answer applies. That
it's okay.
answer applies to every single believer.
Yeah, we should love
Just
them all for
a
for that
woman who's
sake.
living with you all your life. Are you going to say that?
We've got a lot of love to give. It's all good. But it's okay to be annoyed with people. It's okay to be annoyed with people. That's part of any relationship.
No,
When kids get older, you'll get annoyed with them, and they'll be annoyed with their parents, and spouses will be annoyed with each other. It's all part of the blessings of marriage. Yeah, so that's all I've got to add to that.
That was a pointless answer.
Yeah, it's
because all you said is just love every single believer. That's all you just said there.
yeah.
And she's a believer, right?
Yeah. What's your answer?
I'm not saying nothing because I don't know if I've been set up by my wife.
Yeah. Okay, let's change the track. Breast milk for a child. If a woman provides breast milk for a child that's not her own and expresses the milk, is she still considered the milk mother or not?
Hold on, what was about not haram? Have you just gone and deleted that?
No, I might have answered.
Who provides breast milk for a child? That is in her own. By expressing it, is she still
No, the child's not her own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quick test for you, Dr. Sam. Yeah. What's the age that the baby has to be in order for that to count?
2 lunar years.
2 lunar years or
older. No, younger. Younger.
Yeah. Well, what about Hanif is you?
2.5.
2.5. I thought you were a Hanafi. Why were you unsure about that? You're sure about everybody else as you, except for Abu Hanifa's, right?
Yeah, because he's Imam al-Azam. I don't want to misquote him.
Yeah, oh yeah. Listen, be careful. Husnain's watching, and he's a passionate, staunch Hanafi.
At times.
You only see. It doesn't matter how it's given to the child, whether it's directly on the breast or it's expressed and then it's fed to the child. It doesn't matter how it's given, as long as it's within the time period. With Abu Hanifa 2.5 lunar years, with everybody else 2 lunar years. Wallahu a'lam.
Bit of history now. Who was Mansur al-Hallaj?
I'll leave you to answer that.
No. Don't. I'm a bit weak on that particular individual. He was at the time of Sayyidina Junayd al-Baghdadi, right?
Yeah. Mansur al-Hallaj was a person. He's considered. He made comments in the realms of spirituality, which for the awam, for the average person, were misunderstood. Ma fil jubbati illallah. There's nobody except for Allah within this jubba. The statements that he made were statements that indicated al-ittihad ma Allah, becoming one with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a physical sense. And so the ulama of that time, they passed a death sentence upon him because he was saying things that for the average person was problematic. His own reality is different with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's Mansur al-Hallaj. Mansur al-Hallaj was a person of high spiritual rank who made statements publicly that were problematic for the masses. So the ulama passed a death sentence and he was put to death for those statements. Allahu Akbar.
We've got a few questions on particular scholars and whether they're reliable. I think those ones, if you contact Rawdah Trust directly, and maybe you can get a direct response, but probably not ideal to deal with here.
I'll just mention one thing though. I'm Muslim. I don't really know much. I don't follow him, so I don't really know much. I'll just quickly say something, with your permission, if you don't mind.
No, you don't need my permission. Bismillah.
Mufti Mank, he holds some. He makes. I've never heard him. Have you watched him and followed him? Because I know you follow everybody.
I watch it as much as I can handle.
I mean, I've been told that he's very charismatic and he has an effect. Like people love to listen to him. So I don't know.
Mm.
But what I know is that he does have some problematic ideas, and
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
wouldn't advise. But most people thought
I mean,
many.
I think just on just one point, like, mashallah, people do a lot of work and in the deen and dawah and stuff. But I mean, I remember one time when he was talking about moon sighting. Do you have my permission to talk about moon sighting?
Yeah, go on, unless
And
you.
his answer, he's an intelligent person to come to the conclusion that the reason Saudi sight the moon every year before anyone else is that they've got better telescopes. And it's like, how does a grown up actually come to that conclusion as an argument? And so I don't know, it's Allahu alam. All right.
So yeah, I'd advise for people not to listen to him because he has some strange ideas. Yasser Qadhi was the other one I think that was mentioned. Yasser Qadhi, again, I would advise against listening to him. Even though he may have changed some of his views, but he still doesn't hold views that are clearly from Ahl Sunnah. He still hasn't aligned himself to that. So again, I would advise against these. Allahu Akbar.
Muhammad Abdul Salam wants to know if Rasulullah ﷺ had access to Tabut Sakina.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer. Do you know the answer?
Not heard anything about it.
You know what? I like those questions. You know why? Because I can say I don't know the answers. I like that.
I can say it to more questions, mashallah. This is an important one. Is it haram to live with brother-in-laws even if there is no potential risk for temptation?
Should we mention the hadith? In-laws are death.
Yeah. Al-hammu maut. Al-hammu maut.
Honestly, it's a brilliant statement. I mean, every statement the Messenger sometimes made was great. But I just think that statement. In-laws are death. That's but yeah, that's a real point. The point is not your father-in-law and mother-in-law. It's your brother and sister-in-law. So are you allowed to, even though there's no temptation, they're your brother and sister-in-law, so you respect and honor them, and that has to be there. But the ghair mahram, that's the issue. It's not an issue of temptation. Like, what if there's some ghair mahram that you don't really know, and you're never going to be tempted? It's okay for him to move in with you. So it's not an issue of temptation. It's a sharia. This is the Lord of God and His Messenger, which is the ghair mahram. So tempted or not, temptation or not, it's not an issue. The Prophet said, in-laws are death. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. In-laws are death.
There was one question, I can't find it now, but it was about how do people who don't know Arabic, how are they able to focus in prayer if they don't understand?
Let me ask you a question linked to that, Shaykh Saab. When somebody's reading Quran and they don't understand, how do they have the Quran affect them? And then from before that, there are many Arabs who understand the Quran, but it doesn't affect them. Many Arabs who will understand the words of prayer, they just bounce up and down like anybody. So is it really just about the language?
No.
So you say, like, now, mashallah, now you're a master in language now, mashallah. You can see what we're al-akhfash and other things like that now. So before that, when you didn't really know much about anything in language and you stood up there and Imam Sahib reading beautifully, how did that affect you? The times that it did affect you?
It's not something that I can particularly explain the mechanics of, but the heart just reacts to certain situations, even if you don't understand the language. But in terms of, like, for instance, they talk about the tune, right, or what we call the maqamat of Arabic, and the maqamat, whether you're talking about Quran, whether you're talking about qasaid, or whether you're talking about even tunes in English, they have an effect on the spirit. They have an effect, a good effect, a bad effect, a negative effect, a positive effect. It's why when you hear a tune, sometimes people can't help but sort of tap their feet to it. We are creatures that are affected by these things. And if I'm not mistaken, when qasaid were, these maqamat were first and qasaid were first sung, it was in relation to camels, and the camels were responding to the qasaid and going faster and slower according to the thing. So we're kind of camels, and but it does affect. And when you listen to the masters of maqamat, it's amazing. They're like, no, don't say that word like that. Say it like this, because it's a serious. The day of judgment is something serious, or this is something happy. Yeah. So we need to do it like this, and so it connects to that. So even if you don't understand the language, you get the almost the feel for what is happening, and the body kind of responds accordingly. Sometimes knowing Arabic, like if you're a beginner like me, it's a distraction, because you start translating in your head and you start trying to do i'rab, and sometimes it can actually be a distraction if you're
just on that point. I remember a long time ago when I was beginning my studies of Arabic, I was reading in prayer an ayah, ma kana Ibrahimu Yahudiyan. I read it grammatically incorrect. Ma kana Ibrahimu Yahudiyun wala Nasraniyun. Straight away, because I just started now, ism kana, khabar kana, khabar kana. So straight away I corrected myself. Ibrahimu Yahudiyan, ma kana Ibrahimu Yahudiyan wala Nasraniyan. And I was proper chuffed about it. I was all made up. But I remember I mentioned to some person, and he just knocked it out to me. He said, Subhanallah. He says, you're made up about that, but you weren't thinking about Allah at that point. So thanks a lot for that. Really helped. But yeah, so there, like the language itself can become a distraction. But in answer to that person's question, never forget who you're standing in front of. Never forget who you're speaking about. Never forget who you're standing in front of and who you're speaking about. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give openings to your hearts. The words themselves can become a barrier. The language itself can become a barrier if you don't see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala beyond all of this. Wallahu a'lam.
I heard one, I think, I can't remember whether it was, I can't remember who it was, one of the great imams of Central Asia. He said, because the only thing we ever managed to do, is read even just two rakahs with pure khushu and khudu, because it's like people shouldn't forget how difficult it is to have pure khushu during prayer. It is something that even the best from the Muslims have tried to attain. It's difficult.
Absolutely. Let me throw a question to you for what's just been asked, the most recent question. Is there a difference between the Kufi and Basri schools of Arabic language? If so, which is more correct? This is your forte. Tafaddal.
Yeah, there's difference. There wouldn't be two schools if there wasn't any difference between them. Right, so that's the first thing. And you have to really study books, particularly the next book on from Ajurumiyya, which begins to delve into those differences between them. But they're kind of too many to go into, to be honest. Which is more correct? Your guess is as good as mine. It's they all have their proofs, they all have their arguments. It's like saying who's more correct, the Ash'ari school or the Maturidi school. They both have their arguments, and you, like in Qatr al-Nada, which is what you're teaching us at the moment. When you look at the proofs that they bring, like is this what was it? Ni'mah, is it a verb or is it an ism? It's like you got proofs for both, and there's no way you can separate them. We just kind of try to remember what those proofs are. But subhanallah, yeah, it's fascinating though when you get into it. It's amazing. So if you do get a chance to study these books, I wouldn't pass it up. Shaykh? We've got a Shaykh Nuruddin Itir question. So following his passing, rahmatullah. Who would you say are the most senior ulama remaining in Sham at the moment? And which individuals in Sham are regarded as currently being from the Abdal?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to those questions.
Okay, what's a proper adab for reciting the Quran?
هذا كلام ربي سيدنا أكرم ibn Abi Jahl. The most important of all adab with the Quran is realizing who you're speaking to and who's speaking to you. Everything else, once that's in place, everything else will automatically fall into place. Just realize these are the words of my Lord and that he's speaking to me and I'm talking to him. It's a conversation going, and then everything else will fall into place. Allahu Akbar. هذا كلام ربي أكرم ibn Abi Jahl رضي الله عنه. That's what he used to repeat.
Here's a good one. This is about intercession on the Prophet ﷺ's different specific intercessions on the Day of Judgment of removing people out of the hellfire. There's a narration where Hassan al-Basri says that Anas ibn Malik related to him when he was young that the Prophet ﷺ said, I will say, O Lord, allow me to intercede for whoever said there is no God but Allah. Then Allah will say, by my power and my majesty and my supremacy and by my greatness, I will take out whoever said there is no God but Allah. So who is this referring to? Does this apply to Ahlul Kitab?
Ahlul Kitab. Should we read those verses? We're studying Surah Ali Imran at the moment. Should we read those verses? إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَمَاتُوا وَهُمْ كُفَّارٌ. Oh, no. That definitely not Ahlul Kitab. That's speaking about Muslims. Those
Or Ahlul Kitab prior to Islam?
Yeah. Hold on. I will say the Prophet Shafi' li ummatihi. The Prophet intercedes for his ummah. So that's speaking about his own ummah and those who believe in him, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Wallahu alayhi. So again, what Jabir just mentioned there, what does it apply to Ahlul Kitab? Definitely not الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب. Definitely not the unbelievers amongst them. The believers amongst them, those who in the time of Musa alayhi believed in Musa, in the time of Isa alayhi believed in Isa, their shafa'ah comes from their prophets. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi yashfa' li ummati. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi intercedes for his nation. So Ahl al-Kitab, no, that's speaking about Ummah Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wallahu a'lam.
So this is an important one about zakat. Is it valid if a wife pays her zakat with intention of zakat on her husband who is poor and she also provides for the family? Can a wife pay
zakat,
give her zakat to her husband?
There's an agreement in the madhab, in the Hanafi madhab. Husband cannot pay zakat to his wife because the fard upon him is nafaqah, to provide. There's an ikhtilaf the other way around. Now again, let me test you. Which imam of the madhab says he can? Which imam of the madhab says he can't? You can't answer this, then we're removing you for next time. So Abu Hanifa said no. Abu Hanifa said no. Both ways. The husband can't give zakat to the wife, nor the wife.
But Abu Yusuf said
I think both of them, Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad, both of them said that you can. The wife can. Well, that's not accepted opinion in the madhab. That's a weak opinion in the madhab. So the answer is, even if she's providing for the family, doesn't make a difference whether she's looking after the family or not. Zakat cannot go from wife to husband. Allah.
Okay, this is about studies. Where can I read or study about halal? Where's that gone? Where can I study and read about halal finance? I've lost the question now. It's disappeared. But that was the crux of it. In detail, they want to read and study about halal finance in detail.
I don't know. Do you know anything on that? I don't know.
In terms of courses, I don't know. I haven't really There may be some places that do it. I know there's some in Arabic, but in English, I'm not sure.
Okay, so we're not sure. Doctors, so we're not sure.
Flu vaccine, that's a topical one. Is it permissible?
The one with pork gelatin, no. But I believe
That's the nasal spray, right?
the nasal spray. The nasal one is the one with the pork gelatin, right? But there's an alternative without the pork gelatin, so that's the one that should be taken. And although usually that's administered to adults, but it can be administered to children as well. Wallahu a'lam.
Okay. Birthdays, are they permissible to celebrate your own birthday?
There are some ulama who hold it's not. At the same time, there are those who say you can. Interestingly, I remember this a while back. Shaykh Samir al-Nas, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he answered that it's allowed on the basis that we're allowed to celebrate the birthday of the Prophet. So, because it's an expression of shukr, it's an expression of gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The same as celebrating aqiqah, like having an aqiqah, even though the Hanifis have a particular view with that. But aqiqah is celebrating the birth of a child. So there is something within Sharia about the permissibility of it. Those who take a more hardline stance, which is an accepted view, tashabbuh bi ghayr al-Muslimin, it's adopting the practice of non-Muslims. Wallahu a'lam.
One or two questions about personal difficulties and things, just send them directly to Rawdah and they'll kind of contact Shaykh Haroon. I think it's easier to deal with it directly.
Yeah, so if anybody has any personal type of issues they want to discuss, these type of forums are not usually the best places because it's exposing something about yourself, even if you're anonymous. So as Javed mentioned, send it through to Rawdah Trust and they'll forward it on to me. Mitchell's playing up again now. Football-related questions allowed tonight. Mitchell, me and Dr. Jav are still suffering, and it's not going to go for a while.
Yeah. We've got one from a sister. Please, can you clarify about perfumes being haram and praying when having it on your clothing or skin?
What does she mean by that? Does it mean for a woman to wear perfume? Or if she's saying praying with it, like, does that mean about the alcohol content within it?
This is all we've got. It may be, I'm just wondering whether it's about women wearing perfume.
I suspect it's not, because when speaking about praying in it and not having it on your skin, that's more alcohol content within it.
Yeah. Let's deal with it from that perspective.
Yeah. About alcohol, the alcohol content. The safer, there's again you got two different camps on that. The safer view is to not pray with perfume on you, to not pray with it on. That's the safer view. That's the more cautious view. And there are some ulama, in fact, a fairly significant body of scholars who say it's not valid because it's still alcohol. But like with the hand gel question, you have a significant body of scholars who say it's not the same as alcohol that's drunk, and therefore it's lawful. So the safer view is to avoid it, but there's definitely strong views that hold it to be permissible. Allahu a'lam.
Seeing the Prophet ﷺ, this anonymous attendee wants to see the Prophet ﷺ, and as they understand it, protecting the eyes is important. However, everywhere there's haram things like billboards, adverts in schools, places of learning. What would be your advice to protect ourselves from these bad things? Please make dua that I see the Prophet ﷺ in a vision, waking state.
Ya Rab, Ya Rab, Ya Rab. Make a dua, but it's mentioned about Abu Yazid al-Bustami. Abu Yazid al-Bustami, one of the greatest of the Arifin, the knows of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That when he was still young, he asked his mother, how can I see the Prophet in a waking state? And she said, well, how can I see the Prophet? And she says, Akthiru min as-salati alayhi. Send as much prayers as possible upon him. Learn his way, practice his way, call to his way. Immerse yourself completely in the Prophet. After a while, after a time, he comes back and he says that I've seen the Prophet ﷺ. And she says in a waking state or in a dream state. He answers in a dream state. She says old women see him in a dream state. Old women see him in a dream state. So he asked, and how then do I see him in a waking state? And she said, carry on doing what you're doing. Then eventually he comes back and I said, I've seen him in a waking state. And she says to him, you have now taken the first steps in being a man. You've now finally become a man. And the key in that is that immerse yourself completely in the Prophet, and he will come. He will come in a waking state. So make dua, yes, but surround yourself. Everything about you becomes the Prophet. Then you'll begin to see him. Wallahu a'lam. I heard recently one of the Salihin in Yemen, in Tarim, that they mentioned that they used to see the Prophet in a dream all the time. And they asked the Prophet, he stopped coming to him. And they asked him, like, why? And he pointed at the television screen. He said, that's the hijab. He pointed at the television screen. He said, that's the reason that he doesn't come no more. So yeah, it is a fair point, and we're surrounded by everything that blocks the Prophet's in coming to us. We'll wrap up pretty much soon. Yeah. So let's take one or two
easy ones.
Yeah.
Any difference between the iddah of a divorcee and iddah of someone who's got khula?
Khula, don't start me on khula. Don't start. I'm sorry for those who are listening. The reason why the khula now has been complete. There's a bid'ah of khula now in the UK. And the very definition of a bid'ah is the khula that's going on here right now. Khula is a husband agreeing with his wife to release her from the marriage in exchange for either returning a dowry or a financial payment. So you're talking about that. That's a form of talaq. That's a talaq ba'in, that's an irrevocable divorce. So there's no difference. There is no iddah that's 1 month. The only thing that comes remotely near that is istibra al-jariyah. That's 1 month. That's one hayd. That's about slavery. That's something very different. But in terms of iddah, there is no iddah that's 1 month. There's iddah which 3 menstrual cycles. Iddah can be 3 menstrual cycles. It can be pregnancy, the length of pregnancy. It can be 4 months and 10 days in the case of a widow. There is no iddah of 1 month. Wallahu a'lam. Anything else? Just a quick one.
Yeah, miracles and sihr. How do we tell the difference between miracle and sihr?
Let's leave that for a second. Does tajweed that we use for Quran apply for Arabic, such as with Latif? Tajweed only applies to the Quran. There are some who also say it's good to do it when reciting hadith. Beyond that, no. It only applies to the Quran, and some say also applies to the hadith. Wallahu a'lam. What is the proper way to do tawbah, and can we do tawbah in any state, i.e. major impurity requiring ghusl? Tawbah is about sincere repentance in the heart. Sincere repentance in the heart. So can we do tawbah in any state? Yeah, if it's sincere repentance in the heart, then yeah, you don't need to be in a state of purity for that. That's the heart. But then there's other aspects to that, like make a dua, give some sadaqah to burhan. Charity is a proof of acceptance of your tawbah. Pray 2 rak'ahs, salat al-tawbah. So there's other things, but it's really about sincerity in the heart. Wallahu a'lam. And anything else?
Entering Jannah, is it purely through the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as opposed to our good deeds?
Absolutely. That's what the Prophet was told, and that's what he said about himself. And we should not get deluded about our deeds. That's the delusion. What's the first of the hikam? Ibn Ata'illah. من علامات الاعتماد على العمل قلة what you say من علامات الاعتماد على العمل قلة الرجاء عند وجود الزلل. Part of one of the biggest diseases and sicknesses for what we term practicing Muslims is al-i'timad al-amal, relying on your actions, believing that you're saved because you pray and you fast and do all this stuff. Ibn Atta'illah, he said one of the signs that a person is relying too much on his own actions and not on the mercy of Allah is that when he slips, he loses all hope. And when he actually commits a sin and does something wrong, that he loses all hope.
Well, do you know what Jabal Qaf is?
Yeah, it's mentioned in the books of, but I don't know really that much about it, no.
Okay. Any books you recommend for the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu?
Sunnah of the Prophet read books around in Shahr al-Rabi', in the month of Rabi', especially we're moving into the month of Rabi'. And just on that, everybody should just increase in their attachment to the Prophet in this month by doing as much as possible around him, reading about him, reading more in salawat, bringing it to life in the home, getting your kids talking and doing whatever. So read about Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin's Sayyidina Muhammad Rasulullah. Read that. Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin's our Master Muhammad. Read that. Allahu A'lam. I think we're going to stop there because even though there's any question, but I think that's enough. Jazakumullah khairan for everybody for attending, and inshallah we'll meet again in 2 weeks' time. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.